Today, we are so excited to welcome Jared Young of Pendo to talk about Patch That App Up. So,
all right.
Welcome back.
Thank you. All right, since new people have joined the room, I'm going to reset this whole thing and just start from scratch. Again, show of hands, who here hates patch management? Yeah, not like all of us, right? Me too. It's tedious, it's laborious, it takes up way too much time as we continue to make sure that our applications are, patching for 0 days and those kind of things. Another quick show of hands, who here is not doing anything about patch management currently in your environment? It's okay, I'm not shaming or guilting. A few hands here and there, okay? And that's okay. It's fine, and I'm hoping to show you a viable solution here today that leverages a script called Installomator on how you can do that. It doesn't just install apps. You can leverage Jamf in a way to be able to patch those apps up. All right. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jared Young. I'm an IT engineer with Pendo, and if you don't know what Pendo is, it's an analytics and guides company. We were subtly featured in the keynote today. So when you log into Jamf, on the lower right-hand side, when you see the Resource Center, it's also, I think, referred to as Jamf Engage. That's built by Pendo. That new onboarding thing that you'll see in 11 is powered by that as well. So on the back end, what I do for Pendo, I've been with them for 2.5 years now, and coming out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I oversee and maintain our Jamf.
I'll give you my mic. Hang on. Take this.
18th try is the time. All right. All right. Okay. Where was I? I've been working for Pendo for 2.5 years. And I manage and maintain all of their Jamf infrastructure, as well as our Meraki networking infrastructure globally. And I share admin duties on Okta, Slack, Zoom, all the other things. I've been a Jamf admin for over 8 years now, since the Casper days. Version 9 point something is when I implemented Jamf in my previous spot at a school district. And I got Jamf 300 certified earlier this year, and excited about that. Got that going. So, and you can find me on the Mac admin Slack at jared.y if you have any follow-up questions after this that come to you, or if you want to just interact with me in that community there. And then other Jamf communities that I'm a part of is like Jamf Nation and JHeroes. And so I want to do a quick plug for JHeroes. Honestly, without that kind of seriously. You don't want me to do this session today. All right. JHeroes is I would say it's a tight-knit Jamf community where you can bounce ideas off other people, do some networking and troubleshooting with those folks. There's like a monthly meeting that happens. They have a booth in the expo. If you scan this QR code, it will take you right to the sign-up page for JHeroes. And you can find them on Slack at the Jamf-Heroes channel on Mac admins. All right, let's get into it, finally, right? What is Installomator? It's essentially a script that installs apps. And I want to explain what it is before we get into how to implement it or why I'm even using it. And so it's a massive community-driven script. It's nearly 8,000 lines of code. I think it's 7,900 last I checked. So it's a big, massive script. 90% of that script is comprised of the applications that it supports. And the other 10 to 15 kind of percent is more of the nuts and bolts, parameters, and how the whole thing kind of works. Okay? And so I added the names up here on this slide just to kind of give a shout out to those that were involved in conceptualizing this and implementing it and continue to contribute to this, because it right now is kind of a living, breathing thing that's happening to be updated constantly, and more apps are getting added to this very robust script. So I want to talk about why I'm using it. It's not really good in IT to just kind of do things on a whim. You kind of have to have a why behind it, right? And so About a year and a half ago, well, when I started with Pendo 2.5 years ago, I was voluntold that I was going to be the patch management guy because the other guy didn't want to do it. And that's fine. I was new, and that's okay. I got to take those lumps. Well, it went on for about 8 months to a year that I was doing this, and I was like, this is sucking all of my time out of my life because we support roughly 130 apps internally, and I was manually patching these things, and I would do like a patch Friday, if you will. I would set time aside on a Friday and just knock it out in like an hour or two for all the tickets that accumulated that week. And so I needed an automated solution to get out of that rut. And I came across a paid solution and had everything kind of in line to go that route. And then an economic downturn kind of happened and business needs kind of shifted. And so I needed a more cost-effective, a free 99 version, if you will, to implement. And then from the security side of things, they really just wanted a trusted source or a trusted download of that package going forward. And then to be able to quickly patch vulnerabilities because we were seeing like a downtick in vulnerability patching because it was really just on me every Friday. And if I didn't get to it Friday, either the day I had a day off or I was just too busy, it would wait until the following week. And so we're looking at 2 weeks until I'm able to patch something if it wasn't like a 0 day or something like that. So that's why I ended up with Installomator. I found it on the Mac admins community and did some testing and found that it was going to suit the needs of our environment. All right, so getting into it, Installomator practically really only has 2 uses: installing apps and patching apps. And patching is kind of a misnomer in a way because you're really just installing a fresh version of that application. So let's talk about the first section here for just a little bit for installing apps. To set it up for Installomator in your environment in Jamf, you really just need these key components: a Jamf policy, and then you add the Installomator script as a payload, and then you throw an app label on there. I'll explain those in a minute. Then you scope it out and put it in self-service. Now you see something up here that I skipped is racing stripes. Now this is, racing stripe script. So this is something that Dan Snelson has built, and he will go more in depth on that in his session in this room today, I think at 2:45. But essentially what this is just it's a way to add pizzazz or like flair to your installs from self-service. Is there anyone in here using racing stripes with Installomator? First time hearing about it, anyone? Yes, great, good plug for Dan. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what racing stripes looks like coupled with Installomator, but you basically are just adding 2 extra scripts to your payload that kind of sandwich the Installomator script. And it's gonna leverage Swift dialog, and then it will prepare Swift dialog, your Installomator script will run, and then it'll quit Swift dialog, and then there's some extra fancy stuff on the back end that I'll show you here in a minute. So it's probably just really hard to read this in the back of the room, I apologize. But this is just a policy setup. For this example for installing with Installomator, I'm gonna use Warp Terminal. It's a newer terminal similar to like iTerm, but there's some like AI features built into it. And so this is just a newer example that I'm gonna use because it's lightweight and easy to show off. So in this policy, I have a script payload with Installomator attached to it as a script, and then I put the app label, which is just the app name from the script, in there, and then there's some other parameters. So Installomator has about 13 or so parameters that you can leverage for the end user's experience, okay? And so it's like notifying the user if they want to update or not, or prompting them to update or not, those kind of things. For installing, I typically go with the I don't really do notifications for the end user because they're visually there in front of the computer, and they know that it's installed or not. And then there's some other stuff here. I'm not going to go into all that, but this is kind of how those parameters are going to be used. And the Installomator wiki is very in-depth for the Jamf Pro side, and it gets into all of those. And you can find Installomator on GitHub. So this is Installomator with racing stripes. In self-service, you click Install. A nice little Swift dialog window on the lower right-hand side gives a sweet-looking progress bar with an icon overlay of the Warp Terminal. It downloads, it verifies via team ID, and then once it's done, the fancy magic is the files and processes command that you can add to the policy to jump you right into Finder at that application. This video kind of just repeats, and so it'll show it again here. But again, this is built by Dan Snelson, and his blog has a full write-up on how to implement this, and it's very easy to follow with screenshots and step-by-step instructions. You can find that at snelson.us, or you can listen to more on his talk later today. This is pretty cool. I have this implemented for any app that I'm installing with Installomator. This is just part of our payload now, because it's a good visual thing for our end users. All right, use case number 2, patching apps. So when it comes to patching applications, you essentially have 2 methods. You have manual and automated, right? If you're going to boil it down and break it down. And within those methods, you have a few different kind of vehicles, if you will. And so under the manual side, either IT can do it or the end user can do it. Who here votes to just allow the end users and just let's wait on them to update their stuff, right? 0 hands. Because it's not going to happen. Even if your end users might be a local admin, right? And so that's where we run into problems too, is because if you're patching, some of these apps are requiring admin update or admin credentials to update. So these, and for IT, that side of it, it's, like I've said, it's just a time sink, and it's just not a scalable solution in the long run. Yeah, babysitting. So on the other side, we have automated methods. We have scripting, which is what I'm talking about today with Installomator. And then Jamf app installers, which is kind of a newer thing for Jamf to be able to leverage this with patch management. I'm not going to go too in-depth in that today, but it's just one of those solutions. The catalog is not as robust as something like Installomator. And then there's a hosted or paid solution. So a company like DataJar, before, they got acquired by Jamf, but they had a solution for patch management, or Electrona, or something like that. So under the manual method, this is my workflow of what I was doing for every single application. I would remote into a Mac Mini that we had on site that we designated as a patch server. I would download the application, whatever file type it was, capture it with Composer, upload that package to Jamf, update the policy, so because the install policy at the time was still version-based, update the patch definition and patch management, and then the policy version number so that they can get that latest version, clean up the server, and then update the ticket and move out. I'd do this for every app, every Friday. It was exhausting. I'm still tired from it. Yeah, it's awful, right? And so I wanted to put this up there to show you, because maybe you guys can kind of relate with this kind of workflow and how awful it is, and to get away from it. And then also, maybe it's not a lightweight app like Warp. What if it's Microsoft Word, where it's a gig or a gig and a half, where you're having to download, create a composer capture of it, and then upload it? You now locally on that machine have 3+ gigs just for one app. Or it's just, depending on your bandwidth, it's just time consuming. It's not a good solution. So the automated method, you create the patch source in patch management. If it's not there, create some smart groups, get a policy going, and then scope that out. That's really that's your steps to get this going. Okay, so I want to break this down and practically show you guys how to set all this up. Now, typically it's easy as 1, 2, 3. I have kind of 4 and 5 on the end of this. Okay, so let's get into this. This is the meat of it. Step 1, simplify your patch categories. When I inherited our system, when I got hired by Pendo, every app had its own category in patch management, and it was a nightmare to try and track. So like Chrome was in browsers, Zoom in communication, Firefox in development for whatever reason, and I don't know, Better Touch tool in utilities, and just, it was all over the place. And from a category perspective, when you look at in Jamf, there's no top-level information. You have to drop down each of those things. So I suggest simplify your patch categories. What I have up here is macOS, because it's not an app. I want to track that separately. And then Installomator for patch management. Patch management for Installomator, and then patch management for a manual method. Because some apps are still either behind like a paywall or a sign-in, or the developer likes to change their URL every time they update an app with their version number in the URL for whatever reason. And so I boiled this all down. These are the 3 that I had. Now, one caveat to this is when I was transitioning over to this, I had like a staging category that I went through all 130 apps and dumped those all in there. And that kind of created a self-checklist in Jamf for myself. So just a pro tip there. So step 1, we are simplifying our patch categories. Step 2, adding the patch title. When you go to Computers, Patch Management, click New in the upper right-hand corner, use Jamf as your source, and search for the app, click Save. A few extra steps is you got to change it to the category. You have to edit, change the category, and hit Save, because otherwise you'll end up with no category. All right. So going forward, we're going to use the example of Audacity for these next few slides, okay? So we're going to add the patch title and get that in Patch Management so that we're starting to report on it if it's not already there. If you already have the application there from a Jamf source, then you're good to go. Just change the category, and then we'll move on to the next few steps. Step 3A, there's going to be a 3B, and I'll explain why in a minute. We're creating 2 smart groups. This is the way we have to do it. So the first smart group, the criteria is patch reporting, and it'll say Audacity or whatever the application name is. So to find this, if you're newer to Jamf, when you go to your smart groups, it's not going to, sometimes it won't be listed in that initial like top 10 list, if you will. You have to hit Show Advanced Criteria in the upper right-hand corner, and then look for patch reporting. And then once you're in that next little window in that list, then you'll see the application there to choose from. Your operator is going to be less than, and then your value will be latest version. So what this is doing is just creating a reporting smart group to gather any computer that has Audacity on it that's reporting less than the version that Jamf sees. So if it's version 1.3 is the latest, any computer that's 1.2 and below will be added to this group. Now, we cannot add this group as a scope, and that's because it will error out. You can't do this for whatever reason. It's just a weird thing in Jamf. You can't do a smart group scope with this patch reporting type criteria. So what we have to do is create another smart group that kind of sees that other group. It's a nested smart group, if you will. So you have to do the criteria is computer group this time and member of the group we just created on the previous slide. And this way, you can use then this one as your scoping group to kind of trick Jamf and to be able to send those policies out to those computers. And then lastly, we're going to get a policy set up for this whole thing. This is putting it all together, okay? So really in the policy, you're just going to have a script payload with Installomator. You put the app label, and then the notify I do is silent. Depending if it's a core app like Zoom or Slack or something like that, I'll do something a little bit different here so that the end user has a chance to either respond to what's happening with the app update or to update the application if it's already closed or quitted kind of thing. All right, and so again, the Installomator wiki will go through all those different parameters. The only required thing is that you need the label so that the script knows what to reference. And then from there, you use the group that we created in step 3B, scope that out, turn on your frequencies and enable the policy, and then you're good to go. And it kind of just takes care of itself within patch management. That's basically it for setting it up with Installomator for patching. And that's, I just wanted to pull the curtain back and demystify this whole like air around Installomator and how complicated it could be. Yes, it's a big script, but if you break it down into these steps, it's pretty easy to manage and gonna get things switched over. Yeah, I'll do questions at the end. Is that cool? All right. So another thing that I did when I was rearranging and kind of deploying things out is under the policy section, I created a special category to dump all those policies in so that I can quickly visually see what policies were there, what were enabled, and based on the columns to see the check-in and thing like that. And then you could see the smart group I have on the far right there. it's the membership of group that we created in 3B, and that's all that it's scoped out to. So to recap, we're simplifying patch management categories, getting that app added to patch management if it's not already there, creating a couple of smart groups, and a policy, and then scoping. Now, I don't want to leave you with just what I did and how to do it, but like I want to give you some practical kind of getting this out of there stuff. But before we do that, I want to talk about Installomator Labels here for just a second and break out the script just a bit, okay? So this is the label for Audacity. And when I say when you need the label, that's just the part with the open parentheses section where it says Audacity. That's what you're going to use in your label on the Jamf policy side, okay? Everything below that is more for referencing in the script so that the variables and that all the gears that are working with Installomator know what to reference for that application. So I'm going to go over a couple of lines and explain what they are just to kind of peel the layers back. So the first one is just the name that the app is within when it shows up in Finder. The next one is the file type when it's downloaded. The download URL is key because that's where you're actually getting the package from. There is a variable for GitHub, so you really just need the repo owner and the repo name without the slashes. You just do a space, and then it'll reference it and then install it for you. And then lastly, what I like is the security side is the expected team ID. So if the application doesn't have that, it won't install. It's a checks and balances thing, so you're not getting nefarious apps installed into your environment. Okay? And then one last thing with the labels, these are customizable. You can add your own to the script. Warp terminal, what I showed you in the very beginning, I wrote that. Like it's not part of the Installomator script. I found their GitHub repo and built it out and tested an install of it, and I'm like, sweet, it works. And then just got their icon or whatever off their website and went forward from there. And so now that's part of my in-house internal Installomator script that we have. And so you can continue to do that. I've done that for other apps that we support that might not be fully released in Installomator, or there might not be plans for it. So it is doable. And there is a label builder on the Installomator wiki on GitHub to walk you through on how to do that if you don't want to do it manually. All right, as we kind of like land the plane here, I'm going to give some kind of tips and tricks and lessons that I've learned going through this kind of deployment and setting this whole thing up within Pendo. So I have kind of 4 pillars here, if you will, and I'm going to use an analogy equating it to kind of like making a meal, okay? So the planning section, my goal with that was to get some like planned naming schemes so that it wasn't confusing for anyone coming in after me, or even myself after I forget after a week for whatever I was focusing on prior. I planned some app prioritization, so getting those core apps out and patched quickly. For us, it was like Zoom, Slack, Chrome, those kind of things, and getting that at the top of the list. And then creating templates within Jamf for cloning, because that's really helpful if you're doing multiple policies. Just hit clone, and you just got to change the name of the application and the scope, and then you're good to go. So with the planning section, that would be kind of like you open up the cookbook, and you get things going there, and then you're trying to look at the recipe and seeing what you need from the grocery store and that kind of stuff. Organizing is going to be more of along the lines of getting that shopping list taken care of, and then getting all of your ingredients and everything laid out on the counter. And for me, that was restructuring the patch management categories like I showed, and then creating separate categories for the policies, and then having like a spreadsheet so that I could check which apps were good to go and which ones I haven't done, and that kind of thing for tracking purposes. Deployment, this is kind of the cooking stage, getting everything in the oven, setting the table, making sure everyone's ready to eat, and that kind of thing, okay? And so for deployment, I found it key to set realistic goals. If you're supporting over 100 apps like we are, and you're switching everything over to installing and patching, for me, that was 260 applications I had to like go through and touch. So the deployment, I had to really like plan that out. Set like an hour block on Monday, and I want to get through 3 apps during that hour, and just kind of do some focus time. And from beginning to end with planning and inception and deploying and all that, for me, took about 6 weeks total of dedicated time on that. And then lastly, document. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. And I suggest don't document at the end. This is kind of a weird thing, but like document along the way. That way you're not trying to have to remember all the way back. Treat it like you're a court reporter going through this whole thing. And so those are kind of the 4 pillars there. Some more tips and tricks on this slide. I'll just run through these really quick. Again, have a proper naming scheme for all these things so it's not confusing for anybody else that's in your environment. Create templates and clone. Want to highlight the archive old install policies. This gave me a really good chance to self-audit as I went through this whole process. And once I got it down to disable and dump it into a category called Z archive so that it's at the bottom of the alphabetical list, and just get it out of sight, out of mind, or just outright delete it if I know I'm not ever going to reference it again. Test, test, and retest. Anyone here test in prod? As long as you're careful with your scopes, it might be okay. But get a sandbox. If you don't have a Jamf sandbox, talk to your Jamf rep. That way you could just fully play in there and not harm anything or accidentally scope to all computers when you don't naturally view all computers. Anyone done that? Me? Only? No? Okay. All users? Anybody? Jeez. Yeah. Here's some naming schemes that I've come up with. You're more than welcome to take a screenshot of this, but I do have some documents in the resources for this session that has this listed there as well for you. But just make it known what it is and be very concrete. When I first had my Jamf, the jump start way back in the day, they were very like literal, like whatever it is, just list it out literally, the whole thing. That way you can always reference it and you don't have to go into those smart groups to know what those are over time. That's basically it. So as we wrap up here, this QR code will send you to hopefully a Google Drive thing that has a resource list that will mention all the URLs, all like the GitHubs and different things that I referenced today with Mac admins channels and things like that. The other one is a resource guide that I've built. I sanitize it from our internal documents so that you guys can see on how I set this up. And then I think you can reference this thing later as well. So I'm going to wrap. I'm going to land that plane and we'll do a Q&A.
Awesome. Let's give it an applause for Jared. Great job. Great job. All right, so we have some awesome questions. I know lunch is starting, so we're just going to go a few minutes over to address as many questions as we can.
Yeah.
And go from there. So it looks like you have given resources. One question is, though, will these slides be available?
Will these slides be available? I think so. I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure we can work with the JNUC folks to get it online somehow.
Awesome. There will be a recording, so also Command-Shift-4 is an option.
Yeah.
So that works. Awesome. So next question, can you or how can you add applications to the Installomator script that are not supported by default?
Yeah, I kind of covered that with the app label creation thing. There is a app label creation tool on the Installomator GitHub that will walk you through that on how to create that. And yeah, it is allowed. You can do it. I would just, if you're looking to do it with patch management and coinciding that, I would just make sure that the source that you're using in Jamf for that, the app is supported there as well. Because otherwise it's not going to work because the smart group's not going to know what to reference.
Perfect. The next question, have you had issues with the patch definitions from Jamf that are kind of wonky, such as Dropbox and Firefox ESR?
We don't use Firefox ESR internally, and I think only our CEO has Dropbox, and he manages that update. So I'm going to sidestep that, but I haven't really had much. The only app I would say is Better Touch Tool. For whatever reason, that developer likes to update his app every day or at least twice a day. And so I put him on like a naughty list.
Fair. The naughty list is an excellent use of smart groups. Next question. Can you use the Installomator with systems that are deep frozen? How do you deal with the OS's verifying when you open the updated version of the programs?
Yeah, I would say for deep freeze, you're going to have to probably thaw those because it's in a frozen state. and then update your applications. Maybe do that once a month or something like that if you're using that method.
Next question. What was your user feedback like when implemented?
Great question. I would say for the Zoom, it took 1 or 2 cycles for that, because what we do is there's a feature within Zoom to not interrupt the active call, which is fantastic, and it will then prompt them to quit and update Zoom once that call is done and their computer is checked in. And so I lost my train of thought. What was the question? Sorry.
No problem.
Totally.
What was the user feedback
User
like?
feedback. It took 1 or 2 cycles for our users to get used to that, but now it's when an update comes out for Zoom, I think we're at around 90 to 95% patched within 2 days. Something like that? Yeah, it's pretty quick because we're primarily on Zoom.
Last call for questions, so if you do have any, please submit through the application, and we'll go through to Jamf, not our speaker. Well, that's me. What are you doing to make it so we don't have to have 2 smart groups here? It's been like this for a little while. Doesn't seem to be a fix. So here's my answer to that. Put in a feature request
100%.
on Jamf Nation, and everyone in this room go upvote it,
Yeah.
and that's my guess on how that'll get fixed.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Got a couple in the audience. I'm gonna go walk over to a few folks, and then we'll wrap up. While I'm walking over, are you all insane? You're like testing in production? Call your Jamf reps immediately to get a sandbox so you're not testing in production.
Yeah. And get that sandbox on the beta program so you can be apprised of version 11 a week before it releases.
Yeah, because then, you know, when something doesn't go as planned, then it's Jamf broke it. How's you're going? What's your question?
The question is there a way to defer the patches?
Ooh.
Can you defer it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those online, is there a way to defer these patches?
Yes.
What's the way?
Check the parameters and things like that. I think there is a way to kind of say, do this again on next check-in or something like that. So there's ways to defer built into the script itself.
Any other questions while I'm in and walking around? One more, from 2 more? Okay. We'll do these 2 questions, and then I will close the session, and you can always maybe connect in the hallway afterwards. What's your question?
Just wondering if you'd ever tested it with Adobe patching.
For those online, the question is, has this been done with Adobe patching and testing?
Good one. Not really, because it's finicky. Yes, it can work, but we kind of leave that for the Adobe Cloud the RUM thing to take its course and run its course. So yeah, there's a few exceptions there.
Okay, final question. Let me come right on over to you. What's your question?
So what has your experience been with open apps not quitting properly?
So the question is about apps being open and essentially the updates failing if the app is open.
And are you currently using Installomator?
Yes.
Okay.
So like Office.
Yeah. I would suggest maybe if that script is running, put a script before it to force quit the app if it's open, or a files and processes command in a script before that, and just so that it runs in sequential order on the patch side. I know there is a force quit and reopen kind of parameter you can leverage, but if it's like skipping that, then I don't know beyond those kind of things. But cool.
Well, thank you everyone so much for attending those virtually.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you also for your questions and sticking through technical difficulties. Welcome to JNUC. Call your Jamf rep to get a sandbox. So and thank you so much, Jared.
Thank you.
Wonderful job today.
Appreciate it.
Great work.